Hi everybody. So if you've watched my last two flying videos, you've seen me ripping up the skies with this bad boy. This is my modified RC Powers F-15 version 5. So I have 3 good solid flight sessions with this plane now, about 25 flights. Got it dialed in just the way I like it now, and I've flown it on 3-cell and 4-cell. So I've really been able to evaluate it and put it through its paces. So what I wanted to do today was just talk about kind of the modifications, my build, that sort of thing, how I think so far my mods are working out, good, bad, or indifferent, and just some general ideas on how this plane is flying. Excuse me, I'm just going to grab my tea here. So anyway, first thing, let's just talk strictly quick and dirty about the build. So primarily I've built, as I do with a lot of my park jets these days, it's built with Dollar Tree foam or Adams Ready board, as well as some Depron. So the fuselage, wing plate, in this case the vertical stabilizers, all made out of Dollar Tree foam. Some areas the paper left on, mostly from the back trailing edge of the KF airfoils back, and the fuselage and the KF airfoils, the paper has been removed. I've used Depron on my for my elevons so that I didn't have to reinforce those, and that's good and stiff. And then I also used Depron on these 2 nacelles to give really good stiffness longitudinally. So that's pardon me, that's essentially my build. Components, I'm using a quad racing motor, GEP 2306, GEP RC 2306 2750, super powerful. Right now I still have the 6x3 electric sport prop from RC Timer on there because last time I flew it I was running it on 4S. I've got the HobbyWing Platinum PRO 40 amp speed controller, and then fly it on 3S. 2200, and my 4S batteries are 1550 75C. So it's around, I'm around between 520 to 528 grams full up, so just under 19 ounces all up weight. Servos, I'm using 9-gram nylon gear servos from RC Timer for my elevons, 5-gram RC Timer servos, nylon gear servos for my ailerons and my rudders. Okay, so I reduced this plane. It's originally the stock dimensions are 30-inch wingspan and 41 inches long. So I wanted to reduce mine down because because I knew I was going to be using a quad racing motor. Normally the smaller I can get them sort of around the 25-inch wingspan range seems to work the best because it's reduces the drag considerably and makes up for the fact that although these motors produce a lot of power, they don't tend to produce a lot of torque sometimes to muscle through wind and drag and that sort of thing. So I just printed the plans off my my home printer, and something went a little wonky. I was hoping for a 25.5-inch wingspan, so I printed off at 85%. I ended up with a 24 7/8. But not too bad. Luckily, everything still fits. I can still fit. I've only got about 1/8 of an inch of clearance. These 6x3 electric sport props are normally around 6 1/8 inches long. So I've got just enough clearance to run one of these props on 4S. So I got lucky there. My overall length from the tip of the nose to the very back of the elevons is about 34.5 inches, and I already mentioned the weight. Okay, so starting from the front, some of these modifications I made were for function, because of how I wanted the plane to be set up and fly, and others were for form, for scale looks. So I extended I designed 40% KFs. I've done a video on how I do my KFs. I'll have that linked down below. I also well, I'll get to that shortly. So I went with 40% at the wing root here along the fuselage and 40% out here at the tip. And I also extended the KF along the top, out along the top of these intakes. On the plans, I think it stopped right about here, so I chose to extend it all the way out to the front. Two previous F-15s that I've built from other designers, I ran the KF out along to the very front of the intake, and it just seemed to work really, really well. So that's what I did there. I moved the motor forward. I did, once I figured out where the back end of my KFs were going to be, I moved my motor forward about as far as I could so that I could trim this leading edge of the prop slot to give my prop lots of room to breathe. So I ended up moving my motor forward by about 1.25 inches, and I did that for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to try and get my weight as close to the center of gravity. My center of gravity is right about here, so just at the back, kind of the back end of where my rudder servo is here right now. I wanted to get my mass closer to the center of gravity as I possibly could. The other thing that I've learned building with Dollar Tree foam, when you leave the paper on in the back end, it tends to make the back end of the plane quite a bit more heavy. So I wanted to be able to shift some weight forward to compensate for that, so that I didn't end up having to put my battery like way forward to and make a sort of a longer moment of inertia there. I should mention on the inside, when you slide the fuselage into the wing plate, there's a little tiny piece that goes across. Figure out where it is. It goes across right about here. So once I put the bottom part of the fuselage on, before I put the top on, I actually cut that because I don't think it's not really needed for any support. It was more just to guide the piece on, and then what it does is that it's not in the way when I go to slide the battery in there. So that's another modification that I did. Again, that was mostly for function, not necessarily for form. On the plans, the wing tip was actually looked more like a kind of a Sukhoi. It came out and it was a square corner sort of thing. So I rounded that off for the F-15 look. I moved the back end of the prop slot forward, I think only like about 1 inch, maybe not even that much, because again I wanted to have lots of room. I know some people don't like these big gaping holes in their park jets. I don't mind it too much because I'd rather have really good performance and efficiency from my prop. For the ailerons, I ended up making them actually maybe a tiny bit smaller. I added, or I reduced them by about 1/4 inch on the inside here because I didn't want them, the inside part of my aileron here, to interfere with my elevon push rod. And I was a bit concerned because they're not, as you can see here, they're not real big ailerons, but they're super effective. So I got lucky there. Moving back, I made my vertical stabilizers quite a bit smaller than stock. I'll have a link to the RC Powers thread on the F-15, and I have pictures of sort of the diagrams that I drew. And I'll just review this. If you've watched any of my other tabletop videos on when I modify planes, what I did was I actually printed this off of Wikipedia. And what I do is, if I want to get sort of scale proportions, is I'll measure sort of the wingspan on the picture of the diagram schematic of the real plane, and then I'll measure, sort of maybe like tip to tip for the elevon or the height of the vertical stabilizer, and I'll work out a ratio there, because I know that if my wingspan is 24 7/8, or it's easier to use metric when you're doing all these calculations, at least it is for me, and I know that on this diagram the ratio between the wingspan and the span of the elevon is a number, then I can do that same thing to figure out, okay, I want, for scale size, my elevon span needs to be X. So that's what I do, and I'll have a link to the. I just got this one off Wikipedia, so I'll have a link to that down below as well. So I made these shorter. Sorry about the phone interruption there. I should have got my my wingman back here to answer it. Yeah. So anyway, I've made my vertical stabilizers shorter and not as deep here along the bottom. On the plans, they were quite large. Pardon me. I also modified the rudders. The rudders normally would run. They're a little narrower than what I have, and would run sort of the full length. What I did was I made them sort of around the same size as on the Eurofighter F-15, F-16 version 5. I found that those have worked out really well. And actually, these are very, very effective rudders. I have don't have to have very much deflection whatsoever. Back here required a little bit of artistic license. On the plans, the vertical or the horizontal stabilizers were actually shaped exactly like what you'd find on a Sukhoi, and I just couldn't bring myself to put Sukhoi style elevons and horizontal stabilizer. So I sort of hand drew. I've got the you can see I've got the dog tooth here. My horizontal stabilizer, the hinge line is right here, and then the back part, and I went with the sort of the curved tip on the elevon there for scale, more scale looks. So anyway, I won't fire the plane up. My throws, I'm actually very, very surprised with how low my throws need to be to fly this plane the way that I want to. Now I don't fly with a lot of expo. I use about 15% in the pitch and the roll, and about 20% in the yaw. So obviously I don't because the things respond pretty quick. I don't need a whole lot of throw. So I've only got 3/4 of an inch of throw in the pitch in the elevator, which is actually maybe even a little more than what I need, but I like to have that little sort of 10% emergency slush there, so that, you know, if I need to avoid hitting the ground or a tree or myself or whatever, I've got that extra. You know, when I really yank back on the stick, it's going to respond like right now. In the roll, I have 1/2 an inch in the elevons and about 3/8 of an inch in the ailerons. Very, very smooth axial rolls that way. I started off with about 1/2 an inch of throw in my rudder, and when I would go up in a stall turn and kick the rudder over, it would actually induce kind of a little bit of rudder roll, so I reduced that down a little bit. I used these flight test wooden control horns, so I just moved the push rod out to the furthest hole away from the surface, and that reduced it by about 1/16 of an inch, so I guess 7/16 of an inch now, and that's just perfect. You know, if you've watched my videos, I don't fly around slow a lot. I'm not very good at high alpha, and I do a lot of yanking and banking, thrashing and dashing, so to speak. So, you know, I don't need a whole lot of rudder input if I need to keep, you know, the nose from wandering around. So how's everything working? Well, the only thing that has me a little bit concerned maybe is I'm not sure. I have scale size vertical stabilizers. I've only had a little bit of wind once or twice, you know, maybe 5-10 miles an hour. Winds come up for a little bit, and it does tend to wag its tail a little bit in the wind. Now, some of that might be because of size. It's not a very big park jet with that just under 25-inch wingspan compared to 30-inch full size, and you know, maybe these vertical stabilizers, I don't know, maybe I did make them making them scale might make them a little bit small, but overall I'm very, very happy with this airplane. It's super like just unbelievably fast. Previous F-15s that I've built, the fuselage actually is more even with the bottom of these intakes. So I suppose if I wanted to make it a bit more scale, I could do that. But I think that because it has this channel down the center here, and it doesn't look, you know, that, it looks actually still pretty darn good scale-wise, but I think having this channel down the center here prevents, one of the things with F-15s, park jets, is with those, the fuselage almost even with the bottom of these intakes, is it makes for a very flat bottom, and it can cause, especially at speed, it can cause the plane, pardon me, because of all that added lift, it can cause the plane to want to zoom. Like in previous F-15s, I've had to sometimes actually shim the motor down to help prevent the zoom. So far so good, even just hammering it on 4S, you know, and I mean this motor on 4S, I'm running a ridiculous close to 3-to-1 thrust to weight ratio. I haven't seen any problems with zooming thus far, so I'm really super happy with that. Now these intakes are quite a bit longer than, say, you know, they're probably twice as long as what I have on my SU-30 version 4, which is actually a little bit bigger. So they still do provide, I think, a little bit of extra lift. So the plane actually feels lighter on the sticks than I might have expected when I'm just flying around. It's very, very precise. You know, like when I move the sticks and send it a certain way, it essentially locks itself in there, and it doesn't change direction again until I tell it to. So I'm very, very impressed with that. It's not oversensitive. You know, when I give it stick input, it is pretty much immediate, but it's just, you know, smooth. It's not you know, it's not like whack 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 all over the sky. It's very, very smooth, super stable. You know, especially at speed. In my 4S video, you know, I was full out, flat out, you know, straight and level, and then a couple times I went into full throttle, high speed 360-degree turns, and it just tracked like it was on rails, like very, very, you know, it was just doing exactly what I wanted it to do. So I'm very, very impressed. You know, once again, I've built many of the RC Powers F-15 version 5s. With the change in ownership, they're currently not available yet, but hopefully they'll be coming back and be available soon, because they really, really are a good lineup of airplanes. They're simple to build. They're probably the simplest of all the, well, except maybe the V1s, which are mostly profile, but they're some of the simplest and easiest builds, and they, well, there's one that I won't really mention which one it is, but one that I'm not really that fond of, and I built one and I don't fly it anymore, but just about every other one that I've built and flown just had an absolute blast. Like they're easy builds and really good flyers. So very, very impressed with that. So yeah, so there we go. As again, please check out the video description down below. I'll have links to the RC Powers threads where you can kind of look through my build log, more details and pictures on my modifications. I'll have links to my components that I use in this plane, and yeah, just a heck of a good plane. It's really, really a fun plane to fly. So far, haven't seen any bad behaviors. Just locked in, rock solid, and a real joy to fly. So there you go, folks. There's my my walk around table talk on the my modified RC Powers F-15 version 5. Thanks very much for watching. Blue skies, calm winds to everyone. Park jet noise, the other sound of freedom, baby. Take care.